For over 700 years, a single battle-scarred warrior's bloodline silently endured through war, plague, and political upheaval.
And their fortunes rose and fell with that of the Stuarts. But there was far more to King James I's rule than gunpowder, treason, and plot.
But when scientists tested modern descendants of the Stuart Dynasty, they found a hidden Y-DNA marker, one that rewrote everything historians thought they knew.
The DNA is telling us that there has been a non-paternity or break in that Y chromosome chain.
Why did it appear in one royal brother's line and not the other? How did a forgotten mutation from 1298 survive into modern Britain? And what does this mean for our understanding of royal legitimacy? Let's find out. DNA exposes the Stuart Dynasty's hidden bloodline. For years, historians believed they already understood the lineage of Scotland's royal family. But when scientists began running DNA tests on living descendants connected to Scotland's ancient rulers, they uncovered something far more surprising than anyone expected. During these routine genetic studies, researchers discovered a hidden marker buried in the Stuart bloodline for nearly 8 centuries. This single piece of genetic information immediately changed how experts traced the origins of Scotland's most influential royal house. The Stuart dynasty ruled Scotland from 1371, then England from 1603 to 1714, spanning civil war, royal executions, and the temporary collapse of the monarchy. Written records traced this lineage, but DNA would reveal what documents could not. The breakthrough came when geneticists examined male-line descendants and identified a unique Y chromosome marker now known as S781. This marker appeared only in one royal branch and was completely absent in another, even though both groups traced back to the same father. This meant a genetic mutation had occurred in one brother during his lifetime, a rare event that scientists could now trace across 800 years. This single inconsistency forced researchers to look deeper, and what they uncovered reshaped the entire understanding of the family's origins. Through careful analysis, experts linked S781 to Sir John Stewart of Bonkell, a 13th-century nobleman who died in the Battle of Falkirk in 1298 while fighting beside William Wallace. By pinpointing this exact ancestor, scientists achieved something unprecedented. They identified the precise historical moment when a genetic mutation occurred, tying living individuals today directly to a specific figure from medieval Scotland. The results shocked researchers because they revealed that a long-hidden genetic line had survived through hundreds of years without anyone realizing it. People alive today who carry this marker are connected to a branch of the Stewart family that historical records barely mention. The discovery also showed that certain royal lines once believed to be identical were, in fact, genetically distinct from the beginning. This breakthrough opened new pathways to re-examine royal succession, resolve long-standing historical inconsistencies, and understand how the true Stewart bloodline evolved. The Stewart gene that survived 800 years. Sir John Stewart of Bonkell carried a genetic marker that scientists matched to a verifiable historical figure, the first time this level of precision was ever achieved. For researchers, this breakthrough opened a clearer window into the 13th century, a time when written records were limited, inconsistent, and often incomplete. Sir John was the son of Alexander Stewart, the 4th High Steward of Scotland, who lived from 1214 to 1283. Alexander had 2 prominent sons, John and his brother James, who later became the 5th High Steward. When scientists examined DNA samples from modern descendants, they uncovered a distinct genetic split between these 2 brothers. A single mutation appeared in John's line but not in James's, creating 2 separate branches that spread through centuries of Scottish and British history. As more samples were analyzed, the scale of this finding became undeniable. About 20% of men with the Stewart or Stewart surname were identified as direct descendants of Sir John. Another 30% traced their lineage to James. This meant that half of all people carrying these surnames shared a direct connection to Alexander Stewart's medieval household. Current estimates show that more than 17,500 Stewarts alive today descend from Scotland's royal line. For many families, the results confirmed stories that had been passed down for generations, but were never fully proven. The discovery reached an even wider audience when the 10th Duke of Buccleuch volunteered to participate in the study. His family long believed they descended from Sir John Stewart, but gaps in historical documents left room for doubt. When scientists detected the S781 marker in his DNA, it finally confirmed his family's royal ancestry, closing a chapter that had remained unresolved for centuries. This breakthrough demonstrated something historians had struggled with for generations. Genetics could reveal precise truths that written records were never able to capture. What began as a single mutation in the 13th century ultimately provided clarity to thousands of people searching for answers about their origins. How one fallen soldier shaped thousands of lives. Sir John Stewart of Bonkill died violently at the Battle of Falkirk in 1298. He fought beside William Wallace as Scottish forces tried to resist the English army led by King Edward I. The Scots were crushed that day, and Sir John fell alongside thousands of warriors. His death ended his life on the battlefield, but it did not end his bloodline. His sons carried his lineage forward, unaware that their survival would one day reveal a hidden genetic story. Through the following centuries, Scotland faced wars, famines, plagues, and political upheaval. Yet generation after generation, a single genetic marker, known today as S781, quietly traveled down the male line. No one in those early centuries understood what DNA was, yet they lived through events that threatened their survival at every turn. Despite those dangers, the marker persisted. It passed from father to son during times when entire clans disappeared, when disease swept through villages, and when families were forced to flee during English invasions. The continuity of this one marker across more than 700 years is what makes its survival so extraordinary. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is how widespread Sir John's genetic legacy became. Many people living today have no idea they carry the blood of a warrior who died in medieval Scotland. His lineage expanded silently, spreading across regions and generations until modern science finally revealed the scale of its reach. This raised a major question for researchers. When did this bloodline gain real historical importance, and how did it end up tied to royal power? To understand that, we go back to the origins of the Stewart family. Their rise did not begin with noble birth. Instead, it started with a job title. The word Stewart originally referred to a person who managed estates and household affairs for high-ranking lords. It was an administrative position, not an inherited aristocratic status. Early Stewarts served powerful families overseeing finances, land, and daily operations. Their reliability and skill earned them trust, and that trust gradually opened doors that changed their future. As the centuries progressed, members of the Stewart family moved from serving the nobility to becoming part of it. Their responsibilities grew, their influence expanded, and through strategic marriages and political roles, they steadily climbed into positions of national significance. This rise eventually transformed them from loyal administrators into Scotland's ruling dynasty. Once they gained power, their descendants married widely across noble families, further spreading their DNA into countless bloodlines. By the time modern scientists traced the S781 marker back through history, they uncovered a truth no one had expected. A medieval warrior, killed in battle more than 700 years ago, left a genetic footprint that still lives in thousands of people today, and most of them never knew it. A shocking genetic twist. Walter FitzAlan arrived in Scotland during the 12th century as a Breton-Norman knight and became the kingdom's first High Steward. This position, responsible for managing royal estates and securing borders, quickly became hereditary, passing from father to son. FitzAlan played a crucial role in establishing feudal governance and strengthening Scotland's western frontier, laying the foundation for the House of Stewart, which would eventually rule Scotland and later all of Great Britain. Alexander Stewart, born in 1214, was the fourth High Steward. He lived in a Scotland that was struggling to assert itself as a kingdom separate from England, a period marked by violence and instability. Alexander navigated these dangers while raising at least 3 sons and 2 daughters, ensuring his bloodline would continue. His son, Sir John Stewart of Bonkell, became a warrior during Scotland's Wars of Independence. He fought at the Battle of Falkirk in 1298, which ended in a devastating defeat for the Scottish forces. Sir John died in the battle, but his sons survived, preserving a unique genetic marker that would later be traced through DNA testing. Alexander's other son, James Stewart, took a different path. He became the 5th High Steward, expanding his lands and influence before his death in 1309. James's male descendants eventually produced Robert II, who ascended to the Scottish throne in 1371, officially starting the Stuart Dynasty's reign. Over time, this dynasty expanded its control to England, producing generations of kings and queens known for their dramatic personalities, religious conflicts, and often violent deaths. Modern DNA testing revealed a fascinating twist in this lineage. Sir John carried a specific S781 mutation, which passed to all his descendants. James, in contrast, lacked this marker, proving the mutation originated in Sir John rather than their father, Alexander. Both lines of the family spread throughout Scotland, with Robert inheriting the throne at age 54. The dynasty survived for centuries, despite repeated challenges, wars, and internal strife. The Stuarts were prolific in producing heirs, both legitimate and illegitimate. Medieval nobility measured power partly by offspring, and even when legitimate lines failed, illegitimate children often carried the family forward, increasing the prevalence of the unique genetic marker. This ability to survive and reproduce becomes even more remarkable considering the violent deaths that struck 3 generations of the family, whether through warfare or execution. Despite these losses, the bloodline endured, leaving a lasting genetic legacy that DNA testing has now confirmed. The shocking rise and collapse. Walter FitzAlan became Scotland's first High Steward in the 12th century, establishing a hereditary office that later shaped the nation's royal future. His descendant Alexander Stewart, the 4th High Steward, had 2 influential sons. Sir John Stewart of Bonkell fell at the Battle of Falkirk in 1298, while James Stewart became the 5th High Steward. It was James's line that eventually produced Robert II, who claimed the Scottish throne in 1371 and officially began the Stuart Dynasty's rule. By the time Mary, Queen of Scots, rose to power, Scotland was facing intense religious tension. The divide between Protestants and Catholics was widening, and advisors hoped that marrying Mary to a Protestant would stabilize the kingdom. When she met Henry Lord Darnley, their connection was immediate. Mary believed the marriage would protect her throne and help secure Scotland's future. Instead, it collapsed almost as soon as it began. Darnley proved unreliable, insecure, and increasingly dependent on alcohol. Mary refused to give him the authority he demanded, and their marriage quickly turned into both a political disaster and a personal burden. His suspicious death only fueled noble rivalries, and Mary's position weakened dramatically. By 1568, she fled to England, expecting her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, to offer support. Elizabeth, however, saw Mary as a threat, a Catholic queen with a legitimate claim to the English crown at a time when England was firmly Protestant. Mary was placed under strict supervision for nearly 20 years, treated as both a guest and a prisoner. Everything shifted when English authorities uncovered letters linking Mary to a plot to assassinate Elizabeth. This discovery ended any chance of mercy. In 1587, Elizabeth signed the execution warrant. Mary was taken to Fotheringhay Castle, where she became the first Stuart monarch to die by execution. But her bloodline endured. Mary's son, James VI of Scotland, retained control of his kingdom. When Elizabeth died childless in 1603, James inherited the English throne as James I, uniting both realms under one monarch for the first time. The unity proved fragile. James's son, Charles I, inherited deep conflicts between the monarchy and Parliament. These tensions erupted into civil war during the 1640. Charles's forces were defeated, and Parliament put him on trial for treason. On January 30th, 1649, he was executed outside Whitehall Palace, the only British monarch ever killed by his own government. Yet even this did not end the Stuart line. Charles had several children before his death, and when the monarchy was restored in 1660, his sons Charles II and James II eventually ruled. Charles II also fathered many illegitimate children. Several of them received titles, estates, and influence, allowing them to marry into important families and spread the Stuart bloodline even further. Many illegitimate heirs helped preserve the lineage when legitimate branches collapsed through war, disease, or political upheaval. Their survival created an unexpected biological safety net, one that carried the family's unique genetic marker forward long after the main royal line had fractured. James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, the eldest illegitimate son of Charles II, believed he deserved the crown when his father died in 1685. But the throne passed instead to his uncle, James II, keeping the official royal succession intact even as the wider bloodline continued to expand through both legitimate and illegitimate descendants. The Monmouth Uprising. James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth, was the eldest illegitimate son of Charles II. In 1685, he attempted to challenge the rule of his uncle, King James II, by leading a short-lived uprising. The rebellion failed, and Monmouth was executed at the Tower of London. His death marked another violent chapter in Stuart family conflicts, yet it did not halt the expansion of their bloodline. The Stuarts produced so many legitimate and illegitimate children that their DNA spread far beyond the throne. Charles I had several legitimate heirs who carried the dynasty into the next generation. Charles II fathered at least 12 illegitimate children with multiple mistresses, each one creating a new branch of the family tree. James II continued this pattern, adding more offspring through both marriage and extramarital relationships. Every one of these children, whether publicly acknowledged or quietly supported, carried Stuart DNA into new households and influential families. Their elevated social status played a crucial role. Many illegitimate sons and daughters received titles, estates, or arranged marriages, which allowed their genetic lines to merge with powerful noble families across England and Europe. As a result, descendants of these unofficial Stuart branches often held high positions, shaping politics, military leadership, and aristocratic alliances for generations. The private relationships of earlier Stuart monarchs also influenced this expanding legacy. King James I faced persistent rumors about his emotional closeness to Robert Carr and George Villiers, yet he still produced legitimate children with Anne of Denmark, ensuring the dynasty continued through formal succession. Charles I remained devoted to his wife, Henrietta Maria, and together they produced several surviving heirs who carried the royal line through the turbulent Civil War period. Only during his imprisonment did he reportedly seek comfort in a relationship with Jane Horwood. Charles II, however, became the most influential in terms of genetic impact. Despite having no legitimate heirs, his numerous acknowledged illegitimate children created a vast network of descendants. Their marriages, titles, and political influence made them central carriers of Stuart DNA long after the main royal line lost the throne. William III's secret ties. Behind palace walls, another layer of Stuart history was forming, one that written records rarely described but DNA would later expose. Every child fathered by a Stuart king, whether born inside marriage or in complete secrecy, carried distinctive genetic markers. These markers did not stay confined to the royal court. They moved quietly through families, marriages, and hidden relationships, spreading far beyond the line of officially recognized heirs. Some of these children were acknowledged and recorded. Many were not. Parish books left blank spaces. Illegitimate births were disguised under different surnames. Family trees were rewritten to protect wealth, land, and reputations. Entire branches vanished from official histories simply because the truth was inconvenient for those in power. Yet, while documents could be altered or destroyed, DNA could not be erased. As generations passed, these genetic traces continued to move through society. Noble families intermarried with common households. Lines blurred. Stories changed. A child carrying Stewart blood might grow up never knowing anything unusual about their heritage. Over time, the royal markers traveled far from palaces and court circles, residing in people whose ancestors had been deliberately hidden from history. Centuries later, modern DNA research began uncovering patterns no historian had been able to confirm. Scientists found S781 markers in unexpected places, markers that matched the signatures linked to the early Stewart male line. These discoveries confirmed old rumors, clarified disputed family connections, and revealed entirely new branches that had survived only through blood, not through written records. What had once been whispered in private rooms now appeared in genetic data with undeniable clarity. Even after the Stuarts lost the throne and their political authority faded, their biological presence continued to spread far beyond what any historian had documented. The dynasty's influence had not ended with the fall of their crown. Instead, it lived on quietly, preserved in the DNA of people who never imagined they carried a silent piece of royal history. Final blow that destroyed the Stuarts. Queen Anne's story marks the final chapter of the Stuart dynasty, and it begins with a responsibility she understood from the moment she entered public life. She needed to secure an heir. Anne married Prince George of Denmark, a loyal and supportive partner, and together they tried repeatedly to continue their family line. Over the years, Anne endured at least 17 pregnancies. Most ended in miscarriage. Several children were stillborn. A few survived birth but died soon after. Only one child, William, Duke of Gloucester, lived past infancy, and even he died suddenly at the age of 11 in the year 1700. With his death, Anne realized the dynasty's future rested entirely on her, yet every attempt to produce another heir failed. As Anne faced these personal losses, Britain was also navigating major political shifts. She became queen in 1702 and oversaw one of the most significant turning points in British history, the Acts of Union in 1707. This united England and Scotland into a single kingdom known as Great Britain. But even as the new kingdom formed, another crisis was building. Who would inherit the throne after Anne? By the early 18th century, Parliament was deeply concerned. The closest blood relative in the Stewart line was James Francis Edward Stewart, the son of the deposed King James II. But he was Catholic, and Parliament had already barred Catholics from the throne. To prevent a return of Catholic rule, lawmakers passed the Act of Settlement in 1701. It named Sophia of Hanover, a Protestant granddaughter of James I, as Anne's successor if Anne died without a surviving child. Anne continued to rule through political rivalries between the Whigs and Tories, worsening health, and the ongoing War of the Spanish Succession. But despite hopes for a miracle late in life, no child survived. When Anne died in 1714, the succession plan was triggered immediately. Sophia of Hanover had died just weeks earlier, so the crown passed to her son, who became King George I. With his coronation, the Hanover dynasty began, and the political power of the Stuarts ended. Anne's death closed a dynasty that had shaped Scotland for more than 3 centuries, and Britain for over 1. Yet her story remains striking because of the contrast it creates. A queen whose reign transformed the structure of the kingdom, but whose greatest duty of producing an heir ended in repeated tragedy. Her inability to secure the line was not due to lack of effort, but a heartbreaking biological misfortune that permanently shifted the direction of British history. The end of Stuart political power in 1714 wasn't the end of the Stuart bloodline. By the time Anne died, centuries of royal reproduction had already spread the family's DNA throughout Britain. The S781 marker that first appeared in Sir John Stewart in 1298 had survived 416 years of Stuart rule and continued in thousands of people who had no documentation of their connection. Today, approximately 17,500 people with the Stewart or Stewart surname descend from Scotland's royal line, with about 20% carrying Sir John's S781 marker. What researchers achieved was unprecedented in genetic history, tracing a specific mutation to a specific medieval figure and following it 800 years forward to living descendants. The dynasty lost the throne, but their DNA tells a different story. One of survival written in the bloodlines of ordinary families across Britain.